Hey everyone, it's Robin Riley for Bello's Designs. Welcome to my Talk Crafty to Me video. Today we're going to discuss how to use the Distress Embossing Glazes. Before we get into my demonstration, let me once again remind you to join us in our Facebook groups. We have two of them. The first one is called the Bello's Design Lounge. Now in the lounge, we showcase all of our Lavinia products. In the Bello's Design a la carte page, that's page number 2, that's where we showcase all of the other supplies that Patty currently has in stock or on her website. So why don't you join us in both of those groups and you can display your makes for all of us to see. We are also on other social media platforms. We're on Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok. Come on over there, join us. All you have to do is search the hashtag Bello's Designs. Okay, so like I said, we are going to discuss Distress Embossing Glaze. Pretty much the majority of the colors that are in the Distress line have been turned into an embossing glaze. Now, there is some confusion about what embossing glaze is, so hopefully by the end of this video, I will be able to help you understand what this is all about and a few ways that you can use embossing glaze. With that being said, I don't want to cause any confusion with this. This is Distress Micro Glaze. This is more or less a protectant that you can use on top of your designs to keep moisture off of them, or to keep them from fading, or to keep them from running if water were to hit it. This is for another video on another day. Again, Distress Embossing Glaze is totally different from the embossing powder that we're used to using. I always use the Wow powder, but there are so many on the market. As far as I know, there is only this embossing glaze made by Ranger. All right, let's get started, and let me show you first of all the main difference. So today I'm going to be working on ATC sized pieces of paper. These measure 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches. And I'm just doing this for demo purposes. That way, hopefully this will move along quicker for you to see. And as I go, I will describe and give you all of the supplies that I'll be using. For today, I am going to demonstrate 4 different ways to use this embossing glaze. But keep in mind, there are lots more ways out there. The main tool or the main supply that you're going to need is some type of a glue sticky ink pad. I use Versamark. Now Versamark comes in a pad like this. You can get a refillable bottle. It also comes in a pen, and it also comes in a dauber, both of which I don't have, but believe me, after doing this, preparing for this video, I will most definitely be getting those additional items. But other companies make a glue type ink pad. Now mine's pretty old, pretty dirty looking, but it still works. And what this does is it lays down a coating of glue that has to be in place before you can use any of the embossing glazes. So let me just show you quickly the difference between a Distress Embossing Glaze and the Wow embossing powder. Now I will be placing the Versamark onto my card. I'm just going to be dabbing it on. And another tool that is most necessary is some type of a heat tool. Keep in mind you should be working in a well-ventilated area anytime you're heating anything. And these are literally made of plastic, so make sure you're being safe with what you're doing. Okay, so let's apply some ink. And I'm just literally going to dab this onto my card. Before I do that, I'm going to try to save myself a little bit of a mess. I'm going to bring in a piece of scratch paper. Okay, so I'm just going to literally just dab this onto my ATC card. My pad's pretty well inked, so I should be getting some ink on there. Now, I really doubt very much that you can see, but there is a little bit of a shine. So you can tell just by looking if you have that ink in place. Once you have that in place, you simply, I'm going to flip this over. Again, just trying to save a mess for myself. I'm going to apply a small amount of this Distress Glaze, and this is the Picked Raspberry. Super awesome color. I'm going to just shake that around my card, tap off the excess. Now, when working with a small card, I do like to use a pair of tweezers because this gets hot and you can burn your fingers like super easily. So give me a second here to go in and melt this plastic. Hang in here with me. Hopefully, you will be able to see this change on camera. This is the magic of embossing, is when you can actually watch it start to melt. So I'm sure you can see some of that shine. Let me get that going. Now you can heat from either side. You can go from the top or the bottom. Keep in mind you can burn your cards, so don't let the tip of your heat tool hit the paper. So hopefully you can see that's a pretty nice shine on there. And it is translucent. That is the main difference between embossing glaze and embossing powder. Let me clean up my powder here so I don't make too big of a mess. And something I like to use, here's a little tip for you. I use a lint roller, and I rub that over my work surface to pick up any loose pieces of embossing powder or glaze that I missed. All right, let's take a peek real quickly at what a embossing powder looks like. We'll make the comparison. I didn't have a pink, but the closest thing I had to it was this Medellin red. So again, I'm just going to tap on my ink, just a small amount here, shake on my embossing powder, tap it off, and let me slide this out of the way. Let me heat this up. Now I'm taking a chance here. I didn't grab my tweezers. All right, this particular color has some metallic effect to it. I think you'll be able to see that in the camera. Okay, this is an embossing powder. Now, with both of these, you can apply several layers. So let me get this inked up and I'll show you what I mean. So I can put more ink on, run more powder over it, now let me heat this. Okay, with my first layer that I did not provide a good demonstration for you. That's why I went ahead and did a second layer, so that you can truly see the difference here. Okay, here is the embossing powder. This is the glaze. First of all, you can see that the glaze is much shinier than the powder, and you can see through the glaze onto the white background. Here, when I applied the second coat, since I didn't do enough on the first coat, you cannot see through that at all. All right, let me set these aside, clean up my powder. And then I want to demonstrate for you one of the next differences between a powder and the embossing glaze. So when using something that is already stamped, so on this ATC card, I did a smushed background and I just stamped with some VersaFine Clair. Number one, you got to let this dry completely. So, you know, do this and let it set for a few hours before you start applying anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with that embossing, and I'm just going to add that embossing ink just to one section here. I'm going to apply, I'm going back to that Distress glaze. I'm going to apply a coat of that, tap off the excess, and I'm going to heat. Now, what you'll notice here right away is that the ink that was under the embossing glaze is now more pronounced than what it was initially. I hope the camera is able to pick that up for you. It actually makes that ink much more vibrant. And that's VersaFine Clair in Twilight. So I hope I'm sure you can see the difference. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add just regular embossing powder to the base. Let me get this cleaned up, moved away. Here, I'll just use the back side of this. Now I'm going to apply that Versamark ink down here to the base. All right, and I'm going to use that red regular embossing powder. And I want you to notice the difference. Get that spread on there and tapped off. Now let's look at these closely. Embossing glaze, you can see through it, it's transparent. Embossing powder, you're not going to see through any of that. It literally covers up whatever is underneath it. So main difference is it's see-through, the embossing glaze, the embossing powder is not. Okay, moving on now to another demo that I want to do for you. And I want to show you a technique. Let me pull in my cards here. Okay, here is one that I've already done. This is an ATC card that I had done a while ago, just with some Distress Oxides. I also used, the Distressed Oxide was on the background. I used some VersaFine inks on here. Same thing with the hair. He stamped in VersaFine. And what I did here is I just applied the Versamark ink over the entire card, and I covered it with the Hickory Smoke glaze. One of my most favorite colors, believe it or not. Now, when you look at this, this appears to be extremely dark. And in powder form, you're truly not getting the exact color. You won't see the exact color until it is heated. So keep that in mind. When you look at this, you might think, oh, that's awfully dark. But believe me, it's going to lighten up and it'll look exactly like the Distress ink in the same color. So here what I have another example. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the one I'm going to use. Another old ATC that I just created months ago, right? And hang on to these for all kind of reasons. Okay, what I'm going to do is simply take the Versamark ink and I'm going to tap it over the entire ATC card. I want to cover all of this. Now, keep in mind when you do this, your inks have to be totally dry. You don't want to do this on something that you just stamped. You want to let it set for a few hours or even overnight. Don't be in a rush for this. Now I'm going to use that Hickory Smoke glaze and pour it over the entire card. And then tapping off the excess. And I am going to use my tweezers on this one because this gets hot. And I'm going to heat this, and you will see how translucent this will be. Okay, you can see it changing now. Keep in mind that the inked stamp, that red pine tree, that's the small one from Lavinia. I had stamped that in VersaFine Claire Rainforest. Once I apply that embossing glaze, it actually makes that tree stand out brighter. And you can still see, because of the translucency of this powder, you can still see everything underneath. And pretty much, from what I have read, you can use this powder on just about any type of substrate. You could be using it on your inks. You can use it on pastes. You can use it on acrylic paint also. All right, I did spill a little bit of that powder, so in comes my handy dandy lint roller, and I get that cleaned up. Now, something here I want to show you just as demonstration purposes. Here was another background that I had done, and I just simply tapped my Versamark on, applied that same Hickory Smoke, and I just love the effect that this got. Playing around again on an ATC card, I added one of the Lavinia stickers. I was curious to see how the embossing glaze would work on top of the sticker, and it works perfectly well. It actually brings out more of the color. It deepens it. It makes it much richer than what it initially started out as. All right, our next demonstration. I'm going to show you how you can take a stencil, place it over top of a card that is already inked and stamped to get a really unique result. Now, on this ATC, hopefully you can see there's the Lavinia Moon behind it. I not only stamped it in a Distress Oxide ink, but I used some pan pastels to shade over the top. And I wanted to see how the embossing glaze would work on top of pan pastels, and it works great. So there's another substrate that you can use and get great results. So let me bring in an ATC card that I have done a while ago. This is done all with oxide inks. I am using the flower leaf stencil, the Versamark ink, and I buy these cheap makeup pads like at my local dollar store just for this purpose. Now, this is where that Versamark dauber would come in handy, but since I don't have the dauber, I make my own with this. And I'm just going to squish, that's a technical term, squish that Versamark ink through my stencil. I'm sure you cannot see this on camera, but I can see a very thin glaze of the ink under my stencil. Now, when using this Versamark on a stencil, remember to wash your stencil as soon as you can. Simply spraying it with some water and wiping it down will also work. Okay, let me bring in another sheet of my scrap paper. And this time I'm going to use the Rusty Hinge embossing glaze. I like this color a lot. And I'm going to drop that on there. Tap off my excess. And you can see nice coverage there. So let me go ahead and heat this. Okay, you can see the magic start to happen. And you can actually see a little bit of the color underneath coming through. Now, it's not coming through a lot because, yep, I forgot my tweezers. This is not a real, these are not real dark colors underneath. But I think it'll be enough to show you how this embossing glaze responds to the colors. So you can see a variation in the embossing glaze based on what is behind the glaze itself. So that's another great technique. Again, let me clean up my mess here. Bring in my lint brush. Okay, that was pre-inked, right? I used my Distress Oxides first and then applied the stencil. This time around, I am going to stencil first and then apply the ink so you can see the difference. So just using my ATC card, I'm going to use Distress Oxide in Dried Marigold. I'm using a blending brush. And very quickly, I'm just going to apply some ink to this ATC. Yep, I did that wrong. I did that backwards. Hang with me here, guys. We're going to do this the correct way. Sorry about that. I was doing the first part all over again. We're going to start with the Versamark through the stencil using the makeup brush. Goodness gracious. No matter how organized I am, it happens. Okay, got that through. Now I'm going to apply the glaze using that rusty Hinge gan. Let me put a quick coat on here. Tapping off the excess. Let me heat this up. Let me heat this up. Now, as you can see, well, I hope you can see. All right, this isn't super clean as far as working through the stencil. I've got some embossing glaze where I don't want it. So keep in mind, you may want to use an anti-static tool of some sort to place down first. That way you won't get those stray pieces. But for the demo, you'll see what I'm talking about here. Okay, let me get this melted quickly. Again, this is just the Versamark ink through a stencil. I added the glaze. You can see I always forget to grab that little tweezer until I burn myself. Then it's like a reminder. Goodness gracious. Okay, so there's the embossing glaze. I believe it's all melted. Now what I wanted to show you was using any type of ink. It doesn't matter if it's the oxides or just a regular distress inks or the elements. It doesn't matter. When you apply the ink over the top of what you just melted, first of all, you'll notice it dulls that embossing glaze, which is no big deal, first of all. If it stayed that way, that would be okay. I wouldn't be bothered by that, but it doesn't. You need to take a paper towel, come in after you've inked it, and just buff right over top of that glaze. You may get a little ink, especially with me doing this as quickly as I am after applying the ink. But you could wait a little bit if you wanted to, let your ink dry. But as soon as you buff that ink, the shine will return, and you can see that the embossing glaze works as a resist. Just another way to get a resist technique on a card. Okay, once again, let me clean up my mess here. And I have one more demo for you that I would like to share. And this is stamping with Versamark and then embossing. So on this ATC card, I used Lavinia 094 Fir Tree 1, and I stamped it 3 times using 3 different colors of the embossing glaze. Now I'm going to use my Misty here. You can use whatever you like for stamping. An acrylic block would be fine. Bringing in my ATC card, I am going to stamp 1 tree in Versamark. Now I'm just going to tap over it several times, hoping that I get nice coverage. You can look at it and you'll see a sheen. That way you'll know your stamp is covered well. And then pressing it into the paper, once you pull it back, you will definitely see an imprint. Plus, my stamp was a little bit dirty, but that's okay. That's going to get covered up, so I'm not worried about actually seeing a little bit of ink there. Bringing in my scrap paper again. I'm going to first apply, oh, no, let me try this one. Sorry about that. I'm going to use the cracked pistachio first. I'll make it exactly as I did the first one. So I'll apply that. Tap off the extra and heat it. Now keep in mind you can heat from either the top or from underneath. And with the embossing glaze, you will get the same exact results. It doesn't matter which way you do it. Okay, look how cute that is. I love that it's translucent like that. I think that makes for such a pretty stamp instead of, you know, change it up instead of just using ink. Okay, now to apply the second color, all I do is stamp one more time. This time I'll move this little guy over here, lower him a tad bit. Apply the Versamark ink to my stamp. Stamp onto my card. This time, the beautiful Kitsch Flamingo. I love this. Love it, love it, love it. What's so nice about using this, this method is you don't have to worry about any bleeding taking place with the inks. Once they're heat set, they are set. Okay, nice and quick there. Look how sweet that is. Oh, I just adore that. I love it. Okay, cleaning this off, and we'll add one more tree. All right, and this one I'm going to do in Speckled Egg. So let's get that back in my Misty. Gonna put this one down a little lower to make it look like a smaller tree. Using the Versamark again. Stamping. Speckled Egg. See how it looks a little darker than what you would notice? Look, here I have my ink pad here. Okay, see, Speckled Egg looks so much lighter than this does here. But remember, as soon as you heat this, it goes right back to its exact color that will match your ink. All right. let's get that on there. Tap off the extra, heat it up. Now, I think this looks cute as is. Or if you wanted to, you know, this acts as a resist. You could add some ink behind it to give it a different color if you wanted. But I kind of like that combination on white. All right, let me clean this up and we'll go over our makes here real quick. Okay, so let's look at the demo that I did for you. Keep in mind, translucent. That's the main difference between the Distress Embossing Glaze. Okay, that's this side. This was just regular embossing powder. You can see that it's not translucent whatsoever. And let me find my, oh, can't find my other picture to show you. I dropped it somewhere. Okay, you can see the difference there. Okay, the other thing we did was showing you that you can use that translucent glaze on top of any type of substrate, whether it's inks, paints, even the stickers, it works. And it enhances the colors of the ink, giving it a very unique background. I love it. I think it looks so cool. Here's another one that we did over top of a very light ATC card. And once I put that embossing glaze on it, it actually brightened this up. There was another one I showed you. And then using it on a already colored background of any type of ink, using a stencil on the top, and you can see the variation of color of that rusty hinge that I used here based on what is underneath it. And then doing it opposite, I laid down the stencil first and then applied the ink, buffed off the excess ink to act as a resist. And then lastly, just using it as a stamp with the Versamark ink pad. Using that, the embossing glaze, and you just give yourself another option for inking a stamp. Okay, I hope this helped describe and give you examples well enough that you're willing to give this stuff a go. I think it's a lot of fun. If you decide to create some things using the embossing glazes, hey, how about tagging me? Let us all see what you're currently making and have fun with it. It's really fun and it's not hard at all to use. Comes in a whole list of colors. Patty has a ton of them in the shop. Check it out, give it a go, and have fun. Okay, guys, I'll see you again. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.